Really, really from the bottom of my bursting heart. Thank you all for being here. It's just wonderful, and you know, as you all know, I love you all, like, sincerely, and I appreciate people who show up. I think are my favorite kind of people. And it's not nothing to show up. It takes courage. It takes courage in the weather. It takes courage socially. It takes courage to just sort of add one more thing and be among people. And I know it's energy consuming and it's so important. You know, every time we show up, we are building our community stronger and stronger and stronger. And as we head into these horrible, potentially horrible times, and we are still in them in some parts of the world, community is everything. It's everything. And I appreciate being part of your community. And I hope we are there for each other unconditionally, almost. Okay. I'll just say almost because, you know, I don't want to go crazy. I mean, that story is a really compressed version. I stayed there much longer, but I got in with a gallery and friends, and I knew people, and I started painting. And then I painted for several years afterwards, and then I stopped. So I have all my paintings.
So this is a painting from that period?
Yep. Or maybe I did it after when I got back. I don't remember, but they're all rolled up in my house, and we were figuring out a cover, and it was my daughter Samia who said, "Why don't you use one of your paintings?" So I unrolled them all and took pictures. She's in Australia, so she was like, "Oh, this one, this one, this one." So yeah, she really helped me with that cover.
That's cool. So let's talk about this collection. You said that it takes place in a lot of different places, so we got that. How do you think that? Well, how would you describe it first? Can you describe it apart from all the places it's about? Or?
I didn't really know what the theme was or what it was about. Like I had these stories. I was just pulling them together, and I didn't really know what connected them. I was always feeling insecure about my writing, my stories, because it's not one clear through line that's obvious. I'm not just writing about this, and the way books are marketed and the way writers are presented, it's usually, as Shimonde says, you know, one story, and I don't have more than one. And anyways, they're like, it's a mixed bag. And then the more I thought about it and mixing them around, the more I realized it's about little petty things. It's about little corruptions. The way we make compromises, the way we we shift our moral line to justify things, and it's just the way we kind of lose our morality in a little way sometimes, and we allow it for ourselves. And then the one story is called Evidence of My Theory of the People, and that was a story that when I was writing it, I wanted to write about corruption from the point of view of a corrupt person, you know, not from a victim or the consequence, but just, it's always been of interest to me, how do you carry the burden of being an asshole? You know, how do you justify that to yourself? It is a burden.
It's a mystery no one knows.
You know, like how, you know, it's, I mean, the past 2 years with Palestine, with Gaza, like, it's often, you know, how do Israelis live with themselves? And I thought that was such a fascinating question. And then, but how do we live with ourselves on indigenous land? I mean, none of us are very far from justifying and, you know, finding a way to live with our histories and our compromises and our moral abuses. So, you know, I try not to throw stones on glass houses, but so this story in particular, Evidence of My Thievery of the People, I tried to publish it so much, and it's a weird story, it's a kind of tale. Anyways, it remains my favorite, and it's about that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear you talk about it because one of the things I thought was a through line was an exploration of power, and how people deal with violence in themselves also. So this idea of morality is really cool that you're talking about. Since we were just talking about that, then one of my favorite stories in the collection is called Not Blood. It's set in a Jewish settlement in Galilee, in a former Palestinian Arab village known as, am I saying this right? Safuriya,
Which is now Tsipori.
Tsipori.
Yeah.
And it's apparently the birthplace of the Virgin Mary as well. Not in the story, shocker. It's just me.
You did your research,
I just Google.
It actually was part of the story at one point.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting talking about it. So, I really like this story for lots of reasons. One is, I'm not Jewish, but it's told so it seems like a respectfully told story from a Jewish perspective. Of course, I'm not Jewish, so I don't know for sure. I can't speak for all others. But I thought it was really interesting that you attempted to take, you're writing about these new settlers in the space, and they have taken all of the Arabic people's belongings and moved them outside. Of course, what is delineated as inside and outside, always very interesting. But anyway, so they move all these objects outside. But then, they're like, well, that was a really well-made pot. Like, why shouldn't we use it? Those are really nice-looking rugs. Like, why shouldn't we use them? And they start bringing these objects back in to their settlement, and then things start to go wrong because it's really interesting because in the tone that you use, it feels very realistic. It does not feel like fantastical at all. But at the same time, there's this creeping undertone of like a folky horror, haunting feeling happening, and this village is haunted by the objects and the memories that belong to them, by the people who used to live there. And when I was reading it, sorry, mini rant and then I'll stop, but it really made me think of Irish literature and how there's a lot of Irish haunted stories that are really about the British experience of living in Irish people's houses. And Yeats has this poem where he has this refrain that says, "Come build in the empty house of the stair," and the stair is a starling, and starlings steal native birds' nests and live in them. And I kept thinking about that as why we use hauntings in stories to talk about what continues to live despite our denial of what is there. Anyway, so this is a rant rather than a question, but can we talk about this haunted story of yours that I love so much?
It's a kind of anti-Freudian examination, I think. I think if you take modern psychology and you talk about crime or abuse or violence, you break it down psychologically, and I find that limiting. And I think it's more interesting for me to look at it socially and communally, the burden and the impact. And I think, things come back to us. This village and some people in it, crumble and suffer under the weight of the blood that they've spilled, and then hide and then pretend it's not there. Mm-hmm. And it's a Israeli 1948 story, but this is not unique to that part of the world, and these burdens are not unique to that part of the world. It just happens to be alive to me, and alive because of what's going on in Gaza and what's never ending over there. But so I don't know, I'm rambling.
No, it's perfect. It's really interesting. I want to touch a little bit on your novel. Did you feel like there's a difference between writing your novel and writing this collection of short stories?
Yeah, novels are terrible to write.
Don't do it.
Some of you know. They're just awful. I know, they're not. A short story is like a pop song. A pop song is like a beautifully crafted 3 to 5 minute, it has its arc. It has one idea in the melody or the rhythm. It has one idea in the lyric. It's one idea, that's the pop song. And some pop songs that have, other, like, I don't know, Bohemian Rhapsody has more than one idea going on in the lyrics and the tempo and all this, and pop songs can play with that, but a novel is something else, and I think a novel requires so much dedication, and it requires a dedication to the through line, and God, you have to be so meticulous, and I find it hard. In fact, Not Blood, that story you're talking about, is a distilled section of a novel that I'm working out, that I'm this close to giving up on, because I think I've bit off more than I can chew.
Give up.
Sometimes you do bite off more than you can chew. And it's like this perspective, can I tell a story from this perspective in all the detail that it deserves? I don't know. It's something I'm struggling with now, but I made a short story out of it, and that was a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, I've done the same thing, so I get it, but I still think you should write the book. But whatever feels right to you. I'm not going to tell you to read the book. Okay, so thinking about this, just to think briefly about the Philistine before we move on. One is something I really liked about it. The main character, Nadia, she is from Montreal. She's half Canadian and half Palestinian. She goes to live in Egypt for a while. And at the beginning of her stay in Egypt, she's staying at the Hilton. She's very much a tourist. And in your writing, you have a lot of French peppered in, which is something I always like to do. There's this, so Junot Diaz is maybe a complicated person now, but he has this great quote that I think about a lot, because I put a lot of French in my own writing, and his quote is, "Motherfuckers, pardon me, will read a book that's 1/3 Elvish, but put 2 sentences in Spanish, and they think we're taking over."
Right.
And I kind of love, because you don't always give a translation. It's just part of the texture of the place. And when Nadia is first in Egypt, she still has French, and the French is useful. But then the further she goes deeper and deeper into the communities, the local communities, the more she's working in the hospital, the more she's documenting these, the horrors of Palestinian torture, these records of them being tortured. And she's getting to know people and loving people and interacting with people, the more we have more and more and more Arabic. Am I correct? Yeah, okay. And how do you feel? I know how I feel about including, French in my English. How do you feel about including these other languages in your work?
I love it. I love speaking French. I love speaking Arabic. I wish my Arabic was way better. I grew up in a way reading, the classics, and they throw in Greek and Latin and not translate it. There was an understanding that if you were, an educated British person, you're reading, I don't know, Yeats or something, and he's got 2 lines in Latin. There was an understanding that you knew what he was talking about. And I always found that so bizarre. But we live in a multilingual country. So many of us here are multilingual one way or the other. And language is a beautiful thing, the way you can, even if you don't understand it, just the fact that characters are Spanish, I don't speak Spanish at all. I can parse words if I'm reading them, but if I'm reading something like Junot Diaz or lots of people and there's Spanish thrown in, I kind of love it.
Me too.
I kind of love it. It's
I like not knowing everything.
Why do we need to know everything? And I try and translate in the text, but yeah. And also I find Arabic, it's one of those languages, I was really marked in my teens or 20s when somebody said, "Oh, Arabic sounds like swords clashing to me." And that always stayed with me. There's this association, with Arabs and violence. And politically, the Middle East is a very violent region politically. But on the street, on a people level, it's the most welcoming part of the world. People will run after you with your bag of dollar bills because you dropped it. They will follow you for blocks to return your money. Somebody bothers you, you'll have 10 or 20 other people just like this coming in and defending you. They'll drive you across town. There's a beauty and a calmness in the Middle East. And I think the language is very poetic. If you know anything about the structure of Arabic, it is so malleable, it is so fantastic that why not expose yourself a little bit to it?
Oh, that's really cool. So, once we were at the office, and you were telling me that you sort of felt like you started writing kind of in secret. Sorry to share to all of these humans that you know. But I'm really curious about, like, I probably should have asked this at the beginning of this interview, but how did you go from having this sort of secret project to then being a writer and editor?
I was really embarrassed to be a writer. I was never somebody who called myself a writer. As a kid, growing up in my 20s, I would write poetry, and I'd publish actually every now and then. And I remember I did one reading in my 20s. I used to have a really bad stutter, so I never did anything publicly. I can't even believe I'm saying this. This is the other big secret of my life. But, you know, in fact, anybody who knows anything about speech stuff would have heard me blocking at the beginning and kind of fighting through it. Did anybody? Oh, well, come on. Okay. Hey? No? Anyways, I would have noticed.
Because you're a writer.
Oh, but also, if you have speech issues, you notice it in other people. Yeah, I mean, I was shyer. Writing felt so vulnerable. I mean, I did a lot to protect myself as a kid, and writing was like mine. And my parents were not particularly educated, and I just felt like I couldn't share it with them. I didn't want to. And I don't know, it's taken me a long, long time. I mean, I published The Philistine, I was in my 50s, you know. Like, it's just taken me a long time to be settled and happy and see you all and be who I am. It takes a long time, and I think that's okay.
It is okay, and yeah, it's amazing. And for any of you out there, writing is not classical ballet, which means you can also start at whatever stage you're at. You just have to think things and write things. All right, you have a new project coming that is not fiction. Baraka is publishing an anthology in the fall called Raising Palestine, The Cost and Consequences of Solidarity. Tell me about this project.
So Raising Palestine, R-A-Z-I-N-G, is a project that Robin and I talked about just a few months after October 7th, when it just became clear that the onslaught was not ending, and also that the protests were being cracked down upon, and people were starting to get punished professionally and occasionally personally for speaking up in defense of Palestinian sovereignty, Palestinian human rights, ceasefire, genocide. I mean, it took a year for Trudeau to say the word ceasefire. And stories were racking up, and they were not being covered by the mainstream press either. So we're putting together this anthology. We now have about 26 contributors from across the country. It's Canadian only, which turns out actually to now be working in our favor. At first I thought, oh, there's no American contributors, blah, blah, blah. But now we don't care. And these are lawyers, artists, healthcare workers, professors, politicians. There's 2 politicians, journalists, and they are people who have lost their jobs, who have been penalized, who have been censored, who have had to self-centered, who censor. And it's all first-hand accounts of the crackdown and the inability, which is hallucinant, as they say, that this exists. And especially as we are heading into aggression by the US towards Canada, are we going to turn around and suddenly say that, you know, resistance is a good thing? Like, we've been saying resistance is a bad thing for the last 2 years. So I think we're in a moral conundrum and a political conundrum in how we're going to deal with American aggression, given what we've done for the last 2 years to the pro-Palestinian protesters, and given that politically we've been absolutely unwilling to address it. So I hope that this anthology, which will come out in November, will, you know, go some distance in giving voice to this phenomenon.
Thank you. I mean, that's about all I've got. Any questions from the audience? Apart from, are there any books that, yes?
Wait, Asma.
A room that is filled with the people who love you is a very fine room.
It is. Thank you, Asma.
Oh, wonderful. Story about the asshole. Do you do research?
No, I've actually never done character research.
That's right. No, all of the careers are character research.
Oh, well, there's a lot of careers represented in the book, a lot of job occupations. I've never had a career per se. I've had so many different jobs, so many different experiences, and maybe that's given me
human experience. It's
Yeah.
very rich.
Yeah.
It's very, very rich.
So maybe it's given me this breadth of understanding of people. I think I don't know. I mean,
I think Leila is an incredible. From what struck me from reading, both her books back to back, was what an amazing observer Leila is, and I think that. I mean, I'm really biased because I come from a family that's quite complex and weird and
half Lebanese.
Yeah, there's Lebanese. All these things you can't tell. I'm the white one. So, but what I think is that it just makes you see people. Like you live in different contexts all the time, right? And I think that you have this ability to really see people very clearly, and it really comes through in your work. And so research is great. So, the person sitting next to you is my boyfriend, and he does a lot of research for his characters. So that's one approach. But I think that you're a really great observer.
I think it's growing up in the suburbs. Honestly,
No, this is a terrible answer.
No. Growing up in the suburbs in a time. No. Don't move to the suburbs. Oh my God. Growing up in the suburbs. When I grew up in the suburbs, where it was all about putting on masks, and as children, you see that. And maybe it takes you years to realize that you see that, but you do, because children are great readers of the room around them. They mostly have to be, but I think I grew up surrounded by people who wore masks, abused their masks, or were negligent or didn't care. And I don't just mean my parents, and I do mean my parents. No, I do mean my parents to
And they're
a
sitting
certain
right
degree.
here. No.
But they're both not with us. But just suburbs are not healthy places when I grew up in them. So I would never, But you observe. I mean, you see as soon as you see a disconnect. It's like an uncanny valley. The term uncanny valley, it's like, I can't even explain it, but the suburbs are a kind of uncanny valley, and I think if you're tuned into that, it's a lot of material to human nature.
Hi, so my question is, because you were talking about the things that you don't necessarily like from the novel, right? But I guess I'm curious what your favorite thing about writing short stories is, and how you go about starting a short story. Like, where do your ideas come from? What kind of spark needs to start you going?
Well, I think what's great about a short story, and to bring the analogy back to a pop song, I'm a really, 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 really bad guitar player, and I cannot sing. But I play guitar and I sing. To myself. But you start with a chord progression, and it's like, oh, that's really nice, And for me, often the beginning of a story starts with the first line. Like the story that I read to you, it literally started with, winters in a hot country can be deceiving. It's like, ooh, you know, like it just starts with something that feels like a foundation, and then you just build it. The plow, the story you mentioned, I used to bake bread, and I rented a.
And then she had a really big bakery. Not just like, which is great if you just do it at home, but just so you know.
No, I didn't have a bakery, but I rented the bakery, and I worked there at night.
She sold lots
Anyways,
of bread.
and I sold lots of bread. But I used to drive there. It was a 10-kilometer drive in the country in the winter. It was a couple of winters I did that, and it was really scary because I would leave the house at 1 or 2 in the morning, and it was a tiny road, and the water was sometimes there, and I'd see the plows, and then you get to the place, and I open the door because it's so hot, and I'd see the plows, and every now and then I'd away. And over that entire season, I wrote that story in my head. And then I finally wrote it down, but I wrote it in my head. So a novel is really different to me. It can start with a little zinger, but then you're really, I mean, to make it, you have to go off in a lot of directions. And I am educated and read, you know, big rambling Victorian novels, and then Rohinton Mystery, who I love, and then, you know, Anne Marie MacDonald and her novels. So it's like, oof, like those are bars set really high sometimes in terms of sprawl. But I'm trying to reject that sprawl too, because I don't like it anymore. And
So are you going to get into writing experimental literature now? This is the thing we have. Sorry.
Yeah. I don't
No,
like experimental.
she doesn't like
yeah,
it.
I mean, I think some of my, I can. I just feel as long as it's crafty and holds together well, I like more and more spareness and stripped down things. I've been reading, you know, I have on my bookshelf a lot of these older books that are like very small. Animal Farm, 1984. I just have a whole bunch of
Other things about the apocalypse.
They're such tiny little books, you know, they're not 450 pages. They are tiny little, they're amazing, and I actually want to learn from that. You know, how to tell a lot in a really spare and stark way. So,
Yeah.
It's going to be
Yeah.
great. Oh, we have another question? 2 more.
I'm just curious with that, because I feel your work is very cinematic. Like, do you feel there's an influence from your cinema?
yeah, and I think I feel like when I write, when I'm trying to guide myself, I'm like, what does the camera see? And I think as a writer, if you write what the camera sees, readers and context fill in everything else. Yeah.
There's a question.
Yeah. And Sophie, yeah.
I have a question about that. Basically, I'm very loud actually. So I was actually intrigued by the title. I'm sure that's going to be a very interesting story among many. Actually, I'll stand up and
Yeah.
So I said I was intrigued by the title of the book because it's like My Thievery of the People by Leila Marshy. Like, so is she confessing to something? Yes.
I don't set myself apart. I mean, I'm as corrupt as.
And how did you end up choosing that? Because that's one of the things in short stories is, you know, deciding which one is going to be the title.
It's from one of the stories, which is Evidence of My Thievery of the People. And I at first wanted that whole title, Evidence of My Thievery of the People. And then we took out evidence, and then there was back and forth. Should it be Evidence of My Thievery, or should it be My Thievery of the People? So it was really that. To me, that's the best title, and it encapsulates and it incriminates me. Like, you know, it's yeah.
Okay, I'm even more intrigued.
Okay.
Interested in
By the
book.
book.
Sophie, did you?
No, it was her.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thanks for your questions, by the way. This is fun. This is really great.
You're a very good editor as well, and I'm curious about how you feel like, can you apply the same skills when you're editing other people's work for your own work? Is there a transformation that happens when you're looking at your own work in that way? And also, does the experience of editing other people's work enrich your reading of your own?
Yeah. There's a few people here that I've edited, and as they can attest, I'm a really heavy editor, and that's, you know, I understand if people don't like it. But I do that to myself. And yes, the more I edit people, the more I see patterns or tics or wasted energy or wasted sections, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's something I don't want to do anymore. For sure, it's this loop, and I really work on my own stuff. My own writing, I edit a lot. And I'm almost always just culling. I mean, maybe, yeah. I just want to use the fewest words. If I was to give a writing workshop, which I always think, oh, that might be fun, but it would be like less words. You know,
Title
use
of the workshop.
Yeah, fewer words. Make your sentences clearer, more stark. Be the camera. Even if it's, you know, you can do internal monologues, you can do internal thinking, but fewer words. It's like I'm the teak furniture of writing. You know, writing is a craft. It's a craft, and you know, measure twice, cut once. Like we have to think of ourselves as craft people. You know, writing is not just expressing yourself. I think that's the you know, that's, what's the word? It's the wonderful thing about being an artist. You are finding a medium to express yourself, but the medium itself deserves your craftfulness. And you know, and you can't abuse the language, and you can't abuse your reader, and you can't, you know, be lazy. And I think, yeah, edit, shape, form, polish, teak furniture. Look how, like, oh my God, the way the legs taper, the way that, you know, it's a beautiful thing that somebody's doing with wood. And then you look at, you know, pallets of spruce slabs that you know, there's so much you can do with wood. So I'm saying, you know, be teak. I like teak furniture. Deb.
Well, I think it segues here, and I can't find the metaphor that I'm looking for, but metaphor. Like, your metaphors are interesting. And I think maybe that speaks to the economy that you're trying to use with words, because sometimes they're like a really well-placed metaphor. That's all you gotta say. I've been sort of flipping, like looking for the metaphor, because I'm reading your book now at night. You know? So I'm like, where's that metaphor? But I can't find it. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You use metaphors. Some of them I'm like, yeah, and others I'm like, what?
Okay.
So, what's your relationship to metaphor?
Metaphor is everything. In fact, I have a painting with the word metaphor, and anyways, a lot
Because
going on in
it's
the
meta.
painting. But yeah.
Metaphor.
But to me, metaphor is a very economical way of telling a story. It's funny, I was talking to somebody and I was saying Iranian cinema uses metaphor because the Iranian context politically is they can't talk on the nose about things, relationships, politics, social interactions. Everything's told through metaphor. And if you watch Iranian cinema, it's my favorite cinema. I'll watch every Iranian film. It's beautifully done, economically. You know, they don't have a lot of money going in each film. Nothing's wasted. You know, you watch an American blockbuster and it's like, oh my God, money's just being thrown into the fan, and you know, everything like it's not crafty. I think being forced to use it's about craft. I guess I love craft, maybe because I used to bake, and I have tried to make tables and chairs, and it's hard.
That'll be the next career, but not yet, please, because I really enjoy working with you.
So yeah, it's like metaphor, you know, instead of just going on and on and on.
Well, it gives you like a feeling immediately. You get
Yeah.
the gut feeling of the root of something, right?
Right,
It's
right,
a good
and
metaphor,
it
working
adds,
metaphor.
it adds like another layer.
Yeah. You have to be sparing with them.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, oh yeah. Last question.
Now, as someone who's worked so much as an activist, how do you see the role of fiction right now with so many?
Oh, can I read a quote?
That's not too big of a question, but.
Yeah, no, I love it.
I'm glad you brought that up. I sort of skipped over some of those questions because I thought I was leaning too heavily into it, but I'm going to read you a quote from her first book. That
I
read.
ordered hummus for the tables. Did
Yeah,
it
we didn't
come?
get it.
Oh yeah, it came?
No.
Oh. Oh, it's coming.
Thank you, Noah. So great to chime in.
In Leila's novel, her main character Nadia was working in a hospital where her dad is an administrator, and a doctor meets Nadia and says, "I'm very happy to talk to your lovely daughter. She is the next generation. It will be people like her who will take the message of Palestine to the world." Not that that's your job, but it kind of is a little. So activism, writing.
I think an engaged life, a life of service, is a really meaningful life, you know, and I'm not religious. In fact, I really don't like the institution of religion. But I love the idea of service. And I love that we as writers, as artists, as teachers, as whoever, that those of us who can submit, you know, it's like Islam in a way, you know, it's about submission and seeing something bigger than ourselves. I think release and growth and happiness and fulfillment and contentment. In fact, I don't even like the word happiness. Contentment is a much more powerful word. It's solid. And I think we find that in, you know, finding yourself and self-esteem and self-awareness, and that's all important. But I think what's really is the path to that is service, is, you know, how you guys do so much for your communities over there. You know, and a lot of you, I just happen to know that during COVID, those guys were delivering food, they were doing visiting, they were doing a lot of things. And, you know, when we do that, we find purpose. And I think people, you know, you hear stories of people who lose a partner and they're older and they just collapse. And I think if they went out and volunteered in a food bank every Thursday, they would find their way back to strength and contentment. And I think as writers, or artists, we can get lost in the self-expression. And
Back to the village that you were talking about.
It's the village. It's writing about the village. It's seeing yourself as part of the village. And we're in urgent times right now. And a lot of us have lived through some really difficult moments the last couple of years because of Palestine. And we're heading into other difficult moments, and we're going to have decisions to make, and we're going to have to reach out to people, and we're going to have to, you know, count on each other, and I don't think we should be afraid of that, and I think we should you know, lean into it. We should plunge. We should dive into that, and we will be better artists for it. Valerie, your book talks a lot about, in some ways, you know, the role of the artist and how people, you know, use or glom on. I mean, it's so interesting. I don't know if it's Rage Letters or Subterranean. I read one after the other. They were both so good, Valerie Bach. And you know, I think as artists and readers, I mean, I don't stand up. You know, I'm an artist. I don't like doing that. I feel like I'm part of a community.
I had to make her read today.
I didn't even want to read. But you know, like, does anybody ever play Loup-Garou? Like the Villager. I like the village card. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but you know. Yeah.
Well, I think that you have brought a whole bunch of different villages here today, and it is a pleasure to support you and this book launch and in all your work. Also a pleasure to get to know you and work with you.
To you, Melissa.
Thank you, Leila.
We're a great team at Baraka. What a nice thing to land it on.
Robin brings us coffee.
did order hummus. You can stay for. Oh, they have to come and get it? Yes. Okay, so there's I ordered 10 plates of hummus, lots of pita bread. Stick around. It's lovely to see you. It's a cold night before you head out. And yeah, thank you again.